Jon, Anik, and Kenny Florian podcast. Jon, Anik, and Kenny Florian.
I f***ing love him. I can't get enough of him.
Let's hear that Boston next.
Big jab there from Duffy, and Frank Mir is hurt now. Down goes Duffy, out cold. Frank Mir does it again. Rock'em sock'em robots here. Oh my goodness.
Hyperbole. There are a couple of absolutely self-involved bullshit artists.
Here are your hosts, Jon, Anik, and Kenny Florian.
Headshot, bang.
All right, Anakin Florian podcast back in your life, episode 467, presented by Draftkings. Thanks to everybody, by the way, who tuned in live for the watch party last weekend for UFC Fight Night Hermansson versus Pyfer. That replay is still yours on the Anakin Florian podcast YouTube channel. KenFlo, nice shirt. Nice fucking shirt.
That? You like that, kid? Little oxblood kid.
That's what it is. The Oxblood Anakin Florian podcast logo. JonAnik.com for all of your merchandise needs. Promo code One More Sleep for 20% off your order. That goes through UFC 298 this weekend. We have also just released our new flagship One More Sleep design, so you can check those out as well. All right, so coming up today, we will talk to MMA junkie and USA Today Sports' Dan Tom, and also our chief handicapper, Brian Petrie. We'll give you, I think, 7 or 8 plays for UFC 298, and we will close the show with our award-winning segment, Place Your Bets. KenFlo and Brian Petrie will have $1,000 to spend on their wagers for UFC 298. But KenFlo, I got a little game to play with you off the top of the program today.
What do you got?
The game's called Overrated, Underrated, Properly Rated. And the jumping off point for this is that a lot of fans will suggest to me that as commentators, we either overrate a fighter or we underrate a fighter. And Khamzat Chimaev is one name that comes to mind. A lot of fans suggest that I have overrated him, either when it comes to his cardiovascular base or just his overall skill set. So I'm going to throw some names out there, and you got to give me overrated, underrated, or as they might say in Boston, properly rated, right? All right. Overrated, underrated, properly rated. Charles Do Bronx Oliveira, future Hall of Famer. Is he overrated, underrated, or properly rated?
I think he's properly rated, to be honest. And you look at what he has done from a submission standpoint alone, he's got the record. I don't think a whole lot of people are going to be right there behind him for a while anyway. So, yeah, I think he's properly rated. You look at what he's done from a striking standpoint. He's always dangerous. He's one of the most exciting fighters in the sport today. Yeah.
Strong agreement there. I would suggest that Charles Oliveira is properly rated. Yuri Prochazka. Now, after his fight against Alex Pereira, there was sort of a groundswell of the fan base suggesting that maybe we had overrated Prochazka. Certainly accomplished a lot before he got to the UFC, but things happened expeditiously when he got here. What do you think about Yuri Prochazka? Overrated, underrated, or properly rated?
So I assume we're talking from a skill standpoint, right? Because, as far as delivering action and going out there to win that fight by a finish, he's properly rated. Now, from a skill standpoint, I think he might be a bit overrated. Why? I think, he tends to get a little lazy with his hands sometimes, gets a little reckless sometimes. So hard to be consistent long-term with that style. So let's give him a tidbit of being overrated.
It's a hard exercise, right? Because you can't go through all of these names. I think I have 9 or 10 names for you and not suggest that any of these athletes is not overrated. But we have some interesting names. Sugar Sean O'Malley, overrated, underrated, or properly rated?
Yeah.
Can I go first on this one?
Please.
So I think as a grappler and his willingness to grapple, in that realm, I do believe that Sean O'Malley is underrated, but there's not a lot of proof, at least on film. So I think he's an underrated grappler. I think he's properly rated as the striker and sniper that he is. I would suggest he's a little bit underrated when it comes to just the cardiovascular commitment and the overall work ethic, right? I think certainly the mirage is out there and people see him smoking weed, right? There are plenty of fighters that smoke 100 times more weed than Sean O'Malley does, even though he's become synonymous with that substance. I would say Sean O'Malley, in certain parts of his game, is still underrated despite being a UFC champion.
Yeah, I think that's an interesting argument. The most common thing I get from people who have seen Sean O'Malley fight is that, I think he's overrated, yada, yada, yada. How can a guy be overrated when you go out there and knock out one of the best, bantamweight champions of all time in Aljamain Sterling. And he did it while he was injured. Yeah. Right? I mean, that's insane. So I think it kind of all balances itself out, and we have a properly rated fighter in a lot of ways in Sean O'Malley. So there you go.
All right. This one could be interesting. Paddy Pimblett.
Overrated. I think he's overrated because of this. I think he's popular. I think he's exciting. I like hearing him talk. I love the accent, all that stuff. From a skill standpoint, though, he's got a long way to go. I would love to be proven wrong over time, but I do think he's overrated. Yes.
Overrated, underrated, properly rated. Khamzat Chimaev.
Gosh, this is interesting. I was very much on the Chimaev train. I think that seeing him fade a little bit over the course of a fight makes me a little bit concerned for when he does go in there for a 5-rounder for the belt against certain guys. So I think he's slightly overrated, but certainly capable of being a world champion in that sport. So I do think he doesn't have a whole lot of experience right now. So I'd like to see a little bit more, but so I would say slightly overrated. How's that?
Yeah, I think that's fair, but certainly as a welterweight, formerly an absolute monster. And I thought it would have been an eventuality that he become a UFC champion if he could actually make the weight consistently. Remains to be seen as to whether or not he can realize gold at 185 pounds. But when Dana White talks in these lofty terms about Khamzat Chimaev and suggests that he's never seen anything like him, largely I subscribe to that theory. I still think he's one of a few guys that I've never seen anything like him in terms of a comp. So I would say that Khamzat Chimaev is properly rated. All right, how about Dustin Poirier? Hasn't won the undisputed prize. Overrated, underrated, or properly rated?
I think properly rated to see what he's accomplished in both divisions, really, and now really settled in to be an absolute force at 155 pounds, properly rated.
All right, Merab Dvalishvili. We talked a little bit with Ray Longo earlier this week about Merab. I think he's underappreciated in terms of the offensive fighter that he is, in terms of the entertainment value and all that, but overrated, underrated, properly rated Merab Dvalishvili.
Ding, ding, ding. My first underrated vote here. I think he's underrated, man. I don't think people truly appreciate how much energy and how much skill he puts into his fights. He's an absolute terror to go against.
Aljamain Sterling, overrated, underrated, properly rated.
I think he's a little bit underrated as well, to be honest. I don't think he was appreciated as much, certainly when he was champion, as some of the other guys in the division. Whether it was people who, were rubbed the wrong way because of things he said or whatever. But I think he was underrated, man. To see what he did at 135 pounds and the amount of weight that he had to cut, the guys that he beat, I'd say underrated.
All right, and we will close it out with two names that will be fighting at UFC 298 this weekend. Overrated, underrated, properly rated, Ian Machado Gary.
So, I am definitely high on Ian Gary. I think he's a great fighter. I think there's certain people who would say he is strongly overrated right now. I don't think he's underrated. I don't think that's the case.
I think he's properly rated by his contemporaries, right? Yeah. Guys like Bilal Muhammad, when they are asked about stylistic challenges in this welterweight division, they acknowledge him. Certainly a lot of his former Killcliff FC teammates have talked about just how good he is. Derek Brunson comes to mind. I actually think he's a little bit underrated in terms of certain parts of his game, his ability to weaponize cardio and everything else. So forced to choose, I know this is probably the minority opinion. I think Ian Machado Gary, if I believe he can be a world champion, which I do, then I think he's underrated right now.
Gotcha.
At least by the fan base.
Right. The record speaks for itself, too. He's faced some good guys. No one really has had an answer for him. And I think this will be another great test for him moving forward. I think he's properly rated at this stage of the game, man.
All right, last one. Paulo Costa.
Ooh,
tough one.
Gosh. This is a tough one. There's a part of me that says he's underrated. He definitely has some skills to improve on. But, for example, this fight against Whitaker, man, I think that if you underrate someone like Paulo Costa, and yes, he's been away for a little while, I think that will be to your own detriment. Costa is a problem. He loves to get in your face. He throws a lot of volume when he's active and he's in his rhythm. And yeah, I think those are things that kind of people kind of forget about a little bit. I think a lot of people still have that memory of Adesanya kind of schooling him, right? So I think that's kind of the knock on him. But so for that, I think he's a little underrated. He's going to be a problem for a lot of guys, dude.
I would agree. Health is wealth, but noted in the work ethic and the warrior. And part of the reason he hasn't been able to make the walk consistently is because he trains so goddamn hard. And whether it's been staph infections or elbow injuries, things have caught up with him because he goes so goddamn hard. All right, Dan Tom coming up in about a minute. But fight fans, get in on the UFC 298 action with Draftkings Sportsbook, the official sports betting partner of UFC. New customers who deposit $5 or more can get a no-sweat bet up to $1,000 back in a bonus bet. And how fascinating is this UFC 298 fight card? Alexander Volkanovski, Ilia Topuria, featherweight title essentially a pick'em right now. Fight is commanding two-way action, but it appears as though some Volk money has come in. Also interesting, some big underdog prices next to the names of Paulo Costa, Jeff Neal, and Henry Cejudo. You can get in on the action. Download the DraftKings Sportsbook app now and use code AFPOD. New customers can get a no-sweat bet up to $1,000 if your first bet loses, only on DraftKings Sportsbook with code AFPOD. The crown is yours. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER, or in West Virginia, visit 1-800-GAMBLER.net. In New York, call 877-8-HOPE-NY or text HOPE-NY. In Connecticut, help is available for problem gambling. Call 888-789-7777 or visit ccpg.org. Please play responsibly. On behalf of Boot Hill Casino and Resort in Kansas. 21 plus, age varies by jurisdiction, void in Ontario. One no-sweat bet per new customer issued as one bonus bet based on the amount of your initial losing bet. Bonus bets expire 168 hours after issuance. See dkng.com/promos for deposit, wagering, and eligibility restrictions, terms, and responsible gaming resources. All right, you can find him at Dan Tom MMA on X. Long-time respected mixed martial arts analyst for MMA Junkie and USA Today. And this can only be described as an overdue appearance here on the Anik and Florian podcast. Dan Tom is with us. Dan, how are you, brother?
Oh, man, it's an honor to be here with you guys. Obviously, big fan. I'm a big listener of the show, if you believe it or not. And I'm not just saying that to blow smoke up your butts there, Anik. You know I'm a big fan of you. But I don't know, a lot of people, even my own listeners, are surprised to know that one of my favorite fighters, I'm 5'9" from Hawaii. You're going to think it's BJ Penn, right? No. I was a Kenny Florian fan. One of the fighters
wow,
I helped.
Look at that.
One of the fighters, I was a tough noob, man. So I gravitated toward KenFlo. I'm going to spare, just pouring my compliments toward the guy. But big KenFlo fan. So this is big for me, man. So thank you guys.
That's pretty cool. So, you're one of the go-to minds, I think, for a lot of us when we're preparing for these fights. And certainly I know you have a lot of respect from the fan base just in terms of the way you eat film and the way you're able to assess what is inherently a really technical, tricky sport, I think, for a lot of people. So what was the jumping off point for you? Like, when did you become a rabid mixed martial arts fan that has become one of the better analysts out there?
Way too kind of the compliments, but basically, I got into martial arts, kind of like through the gateway martial arts here in the United States, Taekwondo in the 90s. I don't believe that, you should be earning black belts or anything under 18, but I did compete at a national level for what it's worth, and got into Chinese Kempo, which was, in the gi, like a karate, kind of as all things are kind of sold here in the States from that. And I actually went to China twice, trained at the Shaolin Temple 2 summers. From what I gather, I was there the same summer as a young Dan Hardy in the summer of 2000.
Wow.
In the same province, because there are multiple temples there. So of course, I'm still kind of nobody now, and Dan Hardy wasn't, Dan Hardy back then, but I thought that was kind of cool. And I always had that martial art bug. And I was aware of mixed martial arts, right? I'd, see the K1 buses pulling to town with Scotty Cokes back in the day here in Vegas. We'd see the MMA, the old school, no holds bar stuff. But like I said, it wasn't until about Tough. I was in a band and I kind of gave up on my martial arts days. But, my bass player would always come in with his Mirko Crow Cop doing the split shirt, said, destiny awaits. And of course, I was probably cracking some, borderline homophobic comments as kids who grew up in the 90s and 80s, as we kind of did, not making an excuse. But just to point out the fact that I was a bit reluctant, right, to kind of get in. I would poke fun and like, whoa, I bet you like that stuff, huh? And eventually, even though I'm not even a reality TV guy then or now, it was that Tough series that Kenny was on that got me into it. And perhaps portending the future, the reason why I was, for lack of a better word, attracted. Don't get nervous, Kenny. Attracted to Florian because I didn't know he was a collegiate athlete, of course. So I'm not trying to, take it in the spirit that it's meant. But Kenny didn't really stand out, right? He was this pragmatic, more technical guy. Southpaw. I'm a big Southpaw guy here. It's one of the few points of pride I have in my analysis is my Southpaw analysis. So I gravitate towards Southpaws. And unfortunately, I found out real quick after getting an Extreme Couture, after Randy wins does his comeback. No offense, KenFlo, but Randy becomes one of my favorite fighters at that point, right? Joined Extreme Couture 07, 08. And found out real quick, I'm better at, talking about teaching these things than I am at doing it, right? Had an amateur fight, got mopped for 3 rounds by Marvin Eastman's son. And by the time I was able to gather myself and get back into my second camp for an amateur fight in 2015, I sustained a really bad concussion. And that's why I wear these glasses. I know I'm a hipster, but that's actually not why I wear the glasses. It was a concussion sustained in training. And it took me a while to get back. Lost my corporate gig despite having insurance and extra insurance because I was competing at the time. I thought maybe I'll get a broken arm in a jiu-jitsu match. Let me pay for the extra insurance. But unfortunately, as we know, our healthcare system, if there is an insurance system, isn't great here. So if there is, not so sure science like head stuff, they're going to press that. And I was essentially denied coverage from a corporate gig that I was tits at. Never missed a day for 3 years. And they even denied me my Cobra insurance, like your insurance you're supposed to get when you leave. And it was your guys' Coach of the Year nomination. Another reason why I love this podcast, you guys named it after Robert Follis, Coach of the Year. I came up under Neil Melanson originally, who gave me my kind of purple belt, even though he's more of a catch guy. We don't work in the gi. It was Follis, though, it kind of convinced me to get back into the gi, back into martial arts. And when I got injured, he was like, Dan, you used to teach some of the classes, the basic classes, of course, Extreme Couture, kids, adults. He's like, you're pretty good at explaining this stuff. I know you're going mad because you can't get on the mats because of the concussion. Why don't you try, breaking things down and writing about it? And I took Robert Follis's advice. Wow. Next thing you know, I'm picked up by an outlet, MMA Latest across the seas. Then I'm picked up by Flow Combat, I'm sure you guys heard of. And then from there, picked up by MMA Junkie, by, large part and helped by the good graces. Shout out to MMA Junkie Radio, Gorgeous George and George, who have been doing amazing interviews with you both for years. So I know you guys know those guys. And sorry, long-winded, but that's the quick story to how I luckily got here, turned a curse into a blessing, if you will.
Dude, that's awesome. Yeah, I was a Shaolin Kempo karate guy as well, so we share that in common. That's cool. So you grew up in Hawaii, is that the deal?
I came out in the early 90s, like with a lot of the Hawaiians who kind of migrated, right, because of the high prices and whatnot. I go back every year. All my family's up there. But yeah, I didn't start my martial arts training, even though I actually have martial arts family in Hawaii. I didn't start it till I was up in the States. Yeah. And I've pretty much only lived here and briefly in New York, where I was able to train at Marcelo Garcia's only for a little bit because I couldn't afford it. Man, it was expensive out there.
That's awesome. You train with some amazing people, man. But you know what's most interesting are the street fights in Hawaii are significantly better than anywhere else in the world, dude. Like you'll see leg kicks, tie kicks, setups, knees, takedowns. Like literally, these are the most technical street fights in the world. What is it about Hawaii that makes them, first of all, like they just very combative. They love fighting. Obviously, there's a surf culture there too. They're protective of their environment. What is it about that place that makes all these great fighters, or I guess just fighting in general?
Yeah, I don't know, man. I don't want to get like too bro sciencey about it, because there are a lot of cultures. Like we talk about Dagestan, and all these other places. But it's funny. Like we could really, go back and select throughout history, and a lot of groups that went through a lot of adversity, right? So it's always hard to chalk it up to that. But I will say the one thing with that is absolutely bro sciencey that I will stand by, if there's a gun in my head, is that we are pretty thick boned people. We have natural power, and for whatever reason we have chins, which can be bad, by the way, because some of us have relied on that a little too much. But yeah, there is something to that, man. I don't know what it is. A lot of the guys are built to fight. I mean, even me, I'm the most non-athletic, fighter there is, yet I can't help but do it. It's really weird.
And how cool has it been for you, man, to see how far mixed martial arts has come? Is from a technique standpoint, from a tactic standpoint, strategy, what has that evolution been like for you as an analyst?
It's insane because it's still happening. I mean, we could talk about the basic evolution that, thanks in part to the UFC and mixed martial arts in general, just kind of put the whole mixed martial arts world on steroids, right? However, lately, what's been the cool thing, and Kenny, perhaps you can relate to this, perhaps when you went from Shaolin Kempo to working with Peter Welsh and boxing, where I was real big on, when I went to Couture's, I'm going to empty the cup. I'm not going to be like what's killed, in my opinion, a lot of the traditional martial arts guys is that stubbornness to evolve. Mm-hmm. And I emptied the cup. I'm going to do the obvious switches for the switch kick for the MMA, kickboxing, Muay Thai, and all these things. And now as I'm getting into it and getting more, as the sport's evolving and my Muay Thai coach I have with now, even, we're actually incorporating more. Some of these traditional stuff is getting incorporated much more that, I'm sure, Kenny, you were told, don't do that. Disregard that. And Kenny, we had a hard enough time being southpaws, right? You have to kind of train everything both ways. And that was the benefit of that, even being a slow learner, was, okay, I get to learn and I can fight pretty ambidextrously. I'm a right-handed southpaw, more like a Chris Curtis, right? Not like a left-hand dominant guy like a Jeff Neal, who we might talk about. But now everybody switches. So it's like, God dang it. I had, that was like the one thing I had, and you can still, tax people when they try to get cute and match with you as a southpaw, but
yes,
it's a lot harder these days, but there's a lot more weapons that are accepted, which is cool.
Yeah. MMA junkie analyst Dan Tom with us here for the first time on the Anik and Florian podcast. I will get to Jeff Neal and Ian Machado Gary because you sort of teased it, but the fan appetite for this featherweight championship fight is off the charts, and rightfully so. I've been thinking about my pay-per-view open. This is one of the biggest, best singular fights that can possibly put together. I do think the betting line kind of backs that up. Alexander Volkanovski, a slight favorite here against Ilia Topuria. So from your breakdown up to this point, I'm not necessarily asking for you to get too predictive, but how excited are you for this weekend, and what are your expectations for the headliner at UFC 298?
I'm insanely excited, and I've had essentially two vibes going into this fight. The first vibe was Chris Weidman, Anderson Silva 1. If that tells you anything, right? And that tells you to the respect I and many other analysts, and I know you guys yourself have for the skills of Topuria. However, as I get closer into this feels like more like Max Holloway versus Brian Ortega, UFC 231, which, mind you, has one of my favorite John Anik calls very underrated light heavyweight fight between Thiago Santos, Jimmy Manuwa, not just capturing the action, but the emotion. I know that sounds very basic, but John, you're a master at your art, man. People go back and watch John Anik's call after Thiago Santos gets the finish. It's beautiful.
Thank you, buddy.
But Max Holloway fought Ortega that night, and you had a lot of doubts, at that time, featherweight GOAT, health coming in for different reasons than Volk, right? And you saw the betting line reflect it as it does now. It's gotten much tighter. Volkanovski, I believe, opened at a much heavier favorite. However, I am leaning toward the favorite side. I'll give you guys my kind of first look now. John, my analysis doesn't come out till later in the week. So shout out to Big Ron, by the way. If John ever gives you crap, just point to me, Big Ron, because not only do I also put my analysis out late in the week, I've been hitting like crap, and you're actually cashing, bro. So shouts to you. But I'll give you guys my early hit, which maybe will tell you what to fade here. But I'm actually liking Volkanovski here, and I'm liking him because even though I believe he can compete, and we could talk tactics and technique all day between the jab battle and the circling and footwork battle, that is just going to be beautiful to watch unfold between these two. But I have a inkling, that Volkanovski may lean back into his grappling. He initially came on the, scene like a Macedonian Khabib Nurmagomedov almost, right? And working with guys like Craig Jones, and we saw the, developments to that camp, as well as Frank Hickman, who I know particularly because I'm actually going to Bang Tao next week, and I was kind of bummed because I'm like, oh crap, I was going to try to get a wrestling private. I'm like, oh, Frank's going to be with Volk. Of course, he's been there over at Freestyle helping him prepare. So he's got a real grappling heavy camp, guys. Yeah. And I would not be surprised to see that, because even though I wouldn't look too much into that gassing performance in that against, I believe it was the tall gentleman from Factory X, Yusuf Zalal, because UFC debut in that pandemic summer where you give fighters a break. He had the flu and whatnot. However, grappling, despite coming from grappling bases, it still tires the wrestlers out as much as the strikers, folks. It's very tiring, especially over 5 rounds. I believe Chael Sonnen was quoted, you can't wrestle for 5 rounds. Even with some help, it's tough. Right. So I feel like Volkanovski is much more proven in 5 rounds, grappling, being at the wrong end. So I think that Volkanovski could do a little bit more of that. And I'll also be looking at him to see him do more kicks, because stylistically, a kicker is going to give Topuria problems, just like Volkanovski. They've got those dipping propensities, and he southpaws, and he switch kickers to that dipping side. That's going to be money and something to watch out for.
We asked a poll question for our podcast today at Anik Florian Pod of the following main card underdogs. In whom are you most confident to get the win? Henry Cejudo versus Merab Dvalishvili, Paulo Costa versus Robert Whittaker, or Jeff Neal versus Ian Machado Gary? And despite the fact that Jeff Neal has the biggest underdog price at plus 200 or so, 45% of people like Jeff Neal this weekend. Now, Sayif Saud's one of my best friends in the sport, and certainly I've heard him say for years, when his guy is on any given Saturday night, he's the best welterweight in the world. Since you brought up the name Jeff Neal, I'm just curious how you handicap his chances against the undefeated Ian Machado Gary.
That's a tough one because, John, even though it may be hard to make the argument you did the previous segment of calling somebody who's hyped and undefeated is underrated, I absolutely understand where you're coming from. And I reflect that in my own analysis as well, being that, I don't care about the drama stuff outside. I leave that out. And Ian Gary is a good fighter. And particularly, even though we only had the one look prior to Daniel Rodriguez of him against a southpaw, that was against Gabe Green, he actually looked very comfortable in those open stance matchups. I actually called for perhaps an open stance head kick on Rodriguez, which he got. So that could actually be really palpable here. I don't know if he'd be able to finish a guy like Jeff Neal. Here's the trouble. It's because with those guys that are coached by Eric Nixick or Sayif Saud, coaches I greatly respect, is that I know the coach is going to know exactly what to do. But not only are fans not forgiving to the fighters, they certainly aren't forgiving to the coaching staff when things go awry. And it's just hard to depend on Jeff Neal to not headhunt and to not be left side dominant, like I kind of teased. Yeah. He doesn't use the right hand very much outside of the jab. He doesn't go to the body and legs. And that really has killed him in so many matchups. And it's so hard as an analyst. I try not to pick too much of what we don't see, because even like Duplessis and Strickland, I had a powwow with Eric, as I do after. We don't talk strategy before, but we compare notes after. And I said, I'm not afraid, obviously, to pick against our own guys, Eric, but the one edge that I had was that not just Strickland had a guy who, preached consistent body work, one of the only things that even seems to affect Duplessis, but he also had a consistent body work tool in both the jab and mainly the body teep, and we saw him abandon those in the fight, right? So even when it comes to a fighter's tool that they do have, you still can't even depend on them to really use it. Fights are crazy, folks, to predict, right? So that's really tough. I want to pick Jeff Neal as an underdog. I can understand the money coming in on him. I love any fighter with Sayif Saud in his corner, but I'm probably going Ian Gary on that fight.
All right, and before I let you go, Merab Dvalishvili, Henry Cejudo, Robert Whittaker versus Paulo Costa. I'll give you a chance to sound off on either or both of those fights. A lot of people leaning into Robert Whittaker's comments about maybe not meeting the hunger of Dricus du Plessis at UFC 290 last July, and some fans even suggesting that Robert Whittaker is now in the twilight of his career. Anything for us on the co-main event or Merab and Cejudo before we let you fly?
Robert Whittaker is one of my favorite fighters, and not by on purpose. I don't think I've just ever picked against him since I've been doing this. I don't think I'm going to pick against him again. That said, I don't know if I want to bet him in this spot. I agree with the line movement, who the favorite is in Cejudo and Merab, with money coming on Merab. But again, a price that I really don't want. And just to really quickly touch and answer your question, I don't know if we're counting Kopylov as as a main card, but that's actually my dog that I like here, John, because even though I'm a big fan of Fluffy Hernandez, he's got that Mexican chin durability, the Khabib grappling, the stamina. Where's the weakness, right? I'll tell you where the weakness is. The guy gets hurt to the body. Kenny knows this. The guys with the tough chins, go to the body. Sometimes you'll find some success there, and we've seen that. Roman Kopylov has body work stoppages all over. This is going to be in the big cage, which is going to be a little bit better for the striker. I'm probably going to be taking a shot on Kopylov, even though I love Fluffy.
No, I'm so glad you brought that fight into the conversation, because Anthony Fluffy Hernandez was minus 180 on DraftKings Sportsbook, now minus 205. So if you like that juicy price on Roman Kopylov, it's plus 170 right now. All right, on X, he is at Dan Tom MMA. If people want to ingest your work, my friend, of course, MMAJunkie.com, USA Today Sports, but what's the best way to direct them to find your fine analytics, brother?
Oh, I appreciate that. Yeah, I haven't been active on socials, kind of taking a little bit of a break from that in the podcast, but all my work is going to be posted on MMA Junkie. For you gambling addicts out there, check out the Action Network. I'm still posting and tracking my bets. Still didn't do well last weekend, but I'm still actually keeping consistent there, plus the articles that I put out for betting stuff if you're interested in that. But you guys got a kick-ass handicapper coming up, Big Gun Brian Petrie, who I'm a big fan of. Shouts to that guy.
Well, thank you, man. And thank you so much for joining us. And I can assure you that Kenny's going to text me after the show and be like, dude, we got to bring Dan Tom back for like a monthly segment or something. So hopefully the first of many appearances, my man. Keep up the great work. And just know commentators like me are ingesting a lot of what you're putting out there. So thank you for your service, for your great content. And we'll talk to you soon, my man.
It means the world. Thank you guys so much.
All right, there he is, Dan Tom. With us on the Anik and Florian podcast in advance of UFC at 298. Nice to hear him give Big Gun Brian Petrie his flowers as well. And that seems like a pretty good time to call on our chief handicapper for our pronunciation of the week and our main event challenge, and also our Place Your Bet segment. Big Gun Brian Petrie, chief handicapper on the Anik and Florian podcast. How are you?
I'm good. What a gentleman Dan Tom is. I've been following him for a while. Appreciate the kind words to Dan Tom there. Very smart, sharp guy. I love his Southpaw report. Yeah, good to see him on there. That was a pleasure.
So when I went on with Nick Kalikis and Yanni the Greek last week, I'd imagine you didn't ingest that content, and that's okay. But we did bring you up because I told them you were 6'3", and Yanni was like blown away. And I just think a lot of people see you in a box, either on your MMA Takes podcast or here with us on the Anik and Florian podcast, and they don't realize that you can fuck some shit up if you have to. And not just because you're a big guy, you got hands too.
I'm a big guy. Big guy. It's surprising. Listen, if you ask anybody I grew up with, I was the preppy kid. I wore the pink Abercrombie stuff. I wore the fucking $80 holes in my jeans, but I used to throw down because I had a fucking temper and they had this little baby face. So I got doubted a lot and I had to put some hands on them. But that's not here or there. I mean, but yeah, I know it's very surprising to people when I meet him. I mean, that's the first thing Bilal said when I meet him. He's like, Jesus, I didn't think you were this big. So.
And I do think a lot of it has to do with just how youthful you look, right? Yeah. Like if you were told me you were 24, I'd be like, yep.
Got a baby face.
How old are you?
I'm 37.
Jeez, man.
Yeah.
Jeez. I mean, my daughters tell me every day, like, Daddy, you got all these wrinkles next to your eyes. I'm not going to fucking shoot Botox into my face to look better on TV. All right. Pronunciation of the week.
Let's do it.
So I had to go with a Brazilian this week. It's a light heavyweight out of Curitiba, Paraná, Brazil, set to make his UFC debut this weekend. He had a knockout win on the Dana White Contender Series last September. So, what do you have for us? Last name, I think, is Ribeiro. But what do you have for us on this individual, Brian?
So I haven't taped him yet. So I'm going in completely blind. Never heard this guy. I know he fought in the Contenders. I mean, it looks to me Bretson Ribeiro, but I mean, what do we got here?
Cody, what do you have, kid?
Brandson Ribeiro. Brandson Ribeiro.
It just makes me happy hearing Brazilian Portuguese, KenFlo. I don't know what to tell you.
Brandson Ribeiro.
So in terms of Petrie, and I don't have his record for the year, that's probably going to be a no for me.
Yeah,
that's close, Brian.
I mean, that's an L, bud. That's a big fat L. Listen, I keep taking beatings. I lost this weekend. Jeez, lost my shirt this weekend on that Joe Pyfer hit.
It was so obvious, Brian. How did you miss this? Oh, I missed it too. I missed it too. Yeah.
I heard from a lot of my friends who don't bet the UFC regularly. They selectively play mixed martial arts. And one of my former 1510 The Zone producers in Boston, Nate Emmett, sent me a text on the morning of the Super Bowl, sort of intimating like I got a lot less to play with today because Joe Pyfer just literally destroyed my account. And I think a lot of handicappers were in the same boat.
Yeah, it was a tough night.
All right, so I'd like to hear the Dwalish Willie file if we could do that, Cody. Do you have that on hand?
Merab Dwalishvili. Merab Dwalishvili.
Kind of feels like we're butchering both names, but he'll be Marab this weekend. This is just a public service. This is all this is. All right, today's main event challenge is presented by DraftKings. Stay tuned because you will hear more about DraftKings and all it has to offer throughout the show. DraftKings, the crown is yours. We will update the standings in the final segment of the show when we get to Place Your Bets, presented by JohnAnik.com. Right now, though, the main event challenge, UFC 298, Volkanovski versus Topuria. Been a while. Only one pay-per-view thus far this year. Can't wait to get to Anaheim. We got 2 prelim picks, 5 for you on the main card, all in advance of Place Their Bets. First up, guys, in the heavyweight division, Marcos Rogerio Peizao de Lima, -142, taking on Justin Badman Tafa, who is plus 120. So Bri Pazau has not fought, if I'm not mistaken, since that disappointing, devastating knockout loss to the Black Beast Derek Lewis. That was UFC 291 last July. Tafa kind of uneven in his 8 UFC starts. There is no denying the death touch power from Justin Tafa, but this is a step up in competition. On paper, this is the toughest guy he has ever faced. What do you think, Bri? Pazau the favorite, or you going with Tafa the dog?
I was shocked when I looked up Justin Tafa's stats. He's 100% takedown defense in UFC. I figured this guy was getting taken down, but what it is when people get close, he sleeps them. He's got that right hand from death, and he doesn't need a takedown defense. He doesn't need it. I think he's going to have to show maybe some of that in here because Pazau is a fucking giant, thick dude with a mini fridge on top of his shoulders. He's got a good chin. Yes, he's coming off a knockout from Derek Lewis, but Derek Lewis hit him like 20-something times with knees and everything. I mean, no one's taking that, right? Pazau, I think, has a way to win, and that's get the fight to the ground. He's not very great off his back, but when he's on top, he's heavy. He goes for the finish. He does have a rear naked choke 3 fights ago, so he has some submissions, but I'm looking at him just pounding Tafa out. Tafa also has a little bit of cardio issue. Round 1, Tafa KO. That's a gorgeous prop if you want to dive in on that. But once he gets out of round 1, I think he's going to get drowned in those dirty waters by Pazau, excuse me. And I like the Lima here. I like him probably by finish, second or third round is what I'm looking to play this on with the big boys here. Yeah, give me the Lima.
Yeah, it is amazing. He walks around with a mini refrigerator on top of each of his shoulders and never gets tired, despite those appliances that just sit on the top of his fucking shoulders. Kenny, Marcos Rogerio de Lima or Justin Tafa for you?
I got to bounce back here. Just like Pfeiffer has to deal with adversity coming back from that loss, we have to bounce back from adversity here. It's the exact same thing. It's exactly like what Pfeiffer needs to deal with here, BP.
That's right.
Yeah, this is a tricky one. This is very interesting. I think De Lima, if he's going to get it done, he's going to get it done on the ground. Certainly, big guy can knock out anybody. But if there's a knockout that happens, I see it being Tafa. This guy, if he touches you, can put you out, especially in boxing range. He is sneaky athletic with those hands, with his striking. He's very fast for a guy who doesn't look like he's fast. No, he actually is. And De Lima, he's very inconsistent. So it's tough. It's tough to say like what's going to happen. I think the approach for this fight from a betting standpoint would be like, betting the under, I think there's going to be a finish here. It's either going to be a finish for, Pazau if he gets the fight to the ground, or it's going to be a finish from Tafa on the feet. So that's the way I would play this one. Other than that, it's tough to choose necessarily who is going to win. I'd be leaning towards maybe the Brazilian just because of his experience, his level of competition. But that's it. That's what I got on that one.
Well, no, and that's good. That's the beauty of the new main event challenge, right? You don't have to make a prediction. I like that you gave us the under there, 1.5, 2.5. We'll see what those props come out at on DraftKings Sportsbook later this week. All right, featured prelim in the strawweight division. Third-ranked Amanda Lemos, minus 130, taking on seventh-ranked Mackenzie Dern, who is plus 110. Dern stepping in for an injured Tatiana Suarez, and she makes her 13th UFC appearance already here. Mackenzie Dern, 8-4 in the UFC. 3 of those 4 losses have come against Brazilians, Amanda Ribas, Marina Rodriguez, and Jessica Andrade. Now she faces the power proposition brought on by the recent world title challenger, Amanda Lemos. Brian, what do you think? Amanda Lemos minus 130 or Mackenzie Dern plus 110?
Mackenzie, her last fight is burned in my head. That was brutal watching Andrade destroy her like that. I'm a huge Mackenzie Dern fan for multiple reasons, but she is a very, very talented martial artist. And I just hope and wish and pray that she learns some wrestling. 14% takedown accuracy is not going to get it done. She's working with Perillo. She's still in Southern California, which isn't really a hotbed for MMA right now. Every time I see her training, it's in her garage. Who's she training with? Where's the wrestling coming from? And Amanda Lemos is that bad bitch. You know what I mean? She can crack. She's fast. She got caught by Andrade with a standing arm triangle. That can happen. She laid an egg against Zhang Weili Zhang. Sorry, John, don't.
No comment. That's good.
No comment. She laid an egg in that fight. She's coming off that. She's hungry. And I think she has all the tools to just piece up Mackenzie Dern and get another finish here. I hate saying that because, again, I like Dern. I don't want to see her take some more damage. I wish this was Tatiana Suarez, who I'm a huge fan of. That would have been a great fight. But after getting the shit kicked out of me last week, 10-7 last week on last week's card, I'm like bullish in some of my picks. I'm like cocky. Like I know the fucking outcome. I'm heavy on Lemos here at -130. So give me Lemos. I like her in this spot. And I'm probably going to play her by knockout as well, unfortunately, for Mackenzie Dern.
And you know who you love more than Mackenzie Dern is Erica Petrie, who is a loyal viewer of the Anik and Florian podcast. All right, so Amanda Lemos, Kenny really showed her toughness and then some in that one-sided loss to Zhang Wei Li. That was UFC 292 in Boston last year. She is 7-3 in the UFC, but she is going to be 37 years old in May. Dern going to be 31 next month. I would think she'd have a huge grappling advantage if she can get the fight there. What are your thoughts on how this fight might play out? Pretty close on the number.
Yeah, man. Listen, well, I have a question for you guys. So, is she back training with Perillo? Because my understanding, the last fight she was not with Perillo. Is that
right?
Okay.
So I don't. Hang on a second. Hang on a quick second here. Because I have the corner audio all added to my cards already here. So if you just give me a hot second here, Mackenzie Dern. Yeah. So Perillo was not in her corner last time, and she has not listed her corner people on the first iteration of that document. So I don't know that she's still working with Jason Perillo. I'm not sure that is the case, Kenny.
Okay, so that's the way that's what I had thought. Okay, so a couple things. Brian is absolutely spot on. If you are world class in your domain of being on the ground and submitting pretty much anyone and everyone in that division, or having the capability of doing so, Lemos included, who is pretty crafty herself at times. You got to have wrestling, right? We can't do a ground game if I don't have wrestling and MMA. So that has been a huge hiccup for her. Now, what compounds that concern is the fact that she looked even worse on the feet last time out. I am also a big Mackenzie Dern fan for a variety of reasons, just like Brian Petrie. We won't get into that. But, I think she is so talented, but I think she does herself a disservice with some of the approaches to the way that she trains. And that is going to be a concern because Lemos, it's one thing to be a good striker. It's quite another thing to be a good striker and a dangerous one. She can knock out even other very good strikers. And unfortunately for Mackenzie, she's not a great striker at this stage of the game. So that is a big time concern, man. When she's throwing shots, she is throwing shots to absolutely hurt you and separate you from consciousness, as John likes to say. And that's what makes her so exciting. And one thing's for sure, if you do stand up with Mackenzie for a certain amount of time, you are going to land shots. So for me, I like Lemos in this spot. It pains me because I love everything that Mackenzie has done in this sport and outside of it in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. She's hard not to like. Just a great heart, great person. Love her aggression. She's as tough as nails, but I don't like this matchup for her.
I think her new boyfriend, Cody, is pointing out might be her striking coach. I think his name is Antonio Tricoli or something like that. But we'll get more from Mackenzie Dern in the fighter meeting coming up on Thursday. All right. Pay-per-view main card begins with a couple of middleweights long on momentum. Anthony Fluffy Hernandez, -205. He was -180, so some money coming in on Anthony fucking Hernandez. Roman Kopylov counters at +170. Brian Hernandez, I stop at saying he's like come out of nowhere to vault into middleweight contention, but it kind of feels that way. 4 straight wins have earned him the number 14 ranking, puts it on the line here against the decorated, layered Russian striker Roman Kopylov, who has also won 4 in a row. Brian Petrie, who do you love?
Yeah, so I don't like to peacock too much. I'm not a huge told you so guy. I'm not petty, a little bit, kind of. But before my Anik and Florian days, I would do like a little Instagram video about like a fighter that I'm highlighting on the weekend or whatever. And Kopylov was my guy. And then he lost 2 in a row. And I got so much shit for saying this guy was good. Now look at him 4 fights in a row with some knockouts. However, I think he's fantastic and he's a great striker. His body work is fantastic. He's powerful. His 92% takedown defense is great. But Fluffy puts a pace on you, man. You know, the body shots that Dan Tom brought up earlier are definitely a concern of mine. Fluffy gets touched to the body. That's going to be a problem. But the pace he puts on you, not just with his pressure and his grappling, but his hands as well. The kid can throw some hands. And when he gets on top, he's dangerous. And then he'll let you up just to take you down again because he knows he's going off 3. He knows he's not getting tired. I haven't seen that with Kopylov yet. The 4 wins he has are very impressive because they're all by knockout. He's doing what he's supposed to do. But the strength of schedule, to me, is not quite there yet. I love him at the dog money. If you're dog hunting here and you're going Kopylov, that's great. It's a great price. I just trust Fluffy here. I like Fluffy probably by decision. I like the over. DraftKings does have some of the over set up right now. They set this one at 1.5. I'm hammering the over on that. I think that's a little low. I thought it should be 2.5. They're giving me 1.5. I'm taking Fluffy and I'm taking the over.
Nicely done with the handicap there. Yeah, Anthony Fluffy Hernandez, KenFlo, one of those guys, you cut him open, there's like a dog inside his chest, right? What do you think about Fluffy here against Roman Kopylov to kick off the main card?
The Latin Dagestani wrestler, is that what we're talking about? I don't know. That's what I like. That's how I see him, man. This guy, he gets in on your body, whether it's a body lock or in on your legs, and he will not stop trying to take you down. He will not stop trying to advance position. He will not stop trying to destroy you with ground and pound, and he will not stop until you are tapping out, man. I love his style, his aggression. He's one of those guys that you look at him, right? You're like, this guy's he's got some scary tattoos, I guess, but he doesn't look physically intimidating to me. Right. But this dude is a dog. He definitely has that dog in him, man. And I love it. There's some things on the feet where I get a little bit concerned. And when you're facing a guy like Kopylov, who is as dangerous as the other feet, he's got to be careful, especially at range. And as Dan Tom, pointed out, he's got to be careful of those body shots. No question about that. Those are the shots that will kind of just take the literal life out of you.
Yeah.
So it really has to mind his P's and Q's on the feet. However, he does know how to enter into that grappling range extremely well. He has one of the best guillotines that I've seen in a very long time, and has a variety of guillotines as well. So watch out for that. And the pace, the pace, the conditioning can also be a submission. So I like Hernandez here in this spot, to be honest. I don't love the odds right now at this stage of the game, but perhaps you'll see some kind of a bet later on when we talk about it. But nice. I like Hernandez here, man. That's who I'm leaning towards.
Little tease there from KenFlo. So if you cut my chest open, is it like a frog, a cat? It's not a dog in there.
It's a dog. It might be a chihuahua, dude.
Yeah, a dog in there. Yeah.
Maybe a cheetah. I'm actually pretty fast. Maybe a cheetah.
There you go.
Hey, there you go.
Yeah.
My twin brother and I are going to do a 40-yard dash race against each other on film to show the world just how close. I mean, dude, it'll be like a 10th of a second. All
right. Can you guys please do a proper warm-up before this?
We'll try to do a proper warm-up.
Thank you.
I was doing a strength and conditioning workout with this lovely woman, Jody, in our neighborhood, and stretching for like 12 minutes. I'm like, I should probably be doing this, before I pump a bunch of iron. All right. Next main card matchup comes your way in the bantamweight division. Number 2, Merab Dvalishvili, -198, taking on third-ranked Henry Cejudo, who is +164. So Aljamain Sterling right now is the number 1 contender. He will relinquish that spot for good when he competes against Calvin Kattar at featherweight at UFC 300. So a few numbers here as we set it up. Cejudo has fought just one time since 2020, and it was that 5-round split decision loss to Aljo for the title. It was last May at UFC 288. Dvalishvili's won 9 in a row. That includes the triumph over Jose Aldo at UFC 278, 5-round decision win over Piotr Jan 11 months ago. There was a hand surgery in May. That took away his chance to compete again in 2023. But this fight, Bri, gives him the chance to, I would think, secure a title shot, but perhaps no. We need a pick from you, Bri. You going Dvalishvili or Henry Cejudo?
I mean, I know we're all fans or experience the Apex fatigue, but this card is great. Anaheim's got one. I wish it was closer to me so I could attend. I love this fight. I love that they put this together. Man, again, back to what I said earlier, I feel like I have a crystal ball and I know everything. Like, I'm heavy on Merab here, or Merab, excuse me. This guy is an absolute killer and he's getting better. I don't like that Cejudo took time off. He looked a little out of it, slow. Timing was off against Aljo. Now, Aljo can do that to people because Aljo's the funk master. He can mess you up, and that could throw the whole game off. I like what Henry did there. I saw the countdown. He told his coach, hey, I'm not using you for this fight. He's got this whole thing worked out. He's trying new things, but inactivity is a killer when you're fighting a guy like Merab. Merab is going to march forward. His hands are getting better. His cardio is clearly a weapon. He's going to wrestle, and even if he doesn't get a takedown, he's going to keep you there. And then he's going to separate. He's going to land some strikes, and by the time you know it, 3 rounds are gone, and you're losing the decision. I don't think Henry has one-touch power to really clip Merab. I think he has good boxing, but I don't think it's this huge worldly power that Merab hasn't seen before. I see pressure makes diamonds. I see Merab winning this fight. I see it going all 3 rounds. I've seen Henry probably not winning a round. I see a 30-27 clean sweep for Merab, and I like to see him maybe call out the champion next since Aljo's committed to 145. Right, nothing but open doors now for him. He probably could have had a title shot if it wasn't for Aljo, and I think we need it because the videos he's been posting, he's absolutely hilarious. Yeah. He's got a good personality, and I would love a finish. He's got a couple decisions. Maybe the crowd's not going to get behind him with his style, but I don't think so. I think he's an action-packed fighter, and I like him to dominate in this fight.
I am curious how many of these women that Merab Dvalishvili is posing with he is actually sleeping with, but probably not going to get that answer in the fighter meeting. KenFlo, Dvalishvili, Henry Cejudo, big bantamweight fight coming up this weekend. Who do you have?
Oh, this is where we're getting to all the juicy fights, fellas. Hey, listen, when you have my job, sometimes you don't love making picks, right? Sometimes you don't love making picks. Sometimes you have to make these hard decisions. And when I'm going through and I've seen everything that Merab has done, it is unbelievable. The streak, the pacing, the output, it's crazy. But if I'm calculating, I'm looking at all the skills and I'm trying to find that fighter that matches up well against Merab Dvalishvili, I find a guy in Henry Cejudo and I stop right there and I go, this is the guy. I think this is the guy that matches up very well against Merab. What does he want to do? He wants to throw a lot of stuff from the outside. Then he wants to get on the inside and take you down. Now let's talk about the takedown. Do I believe that he's going to take someone down like a Henry Cejudo? No, I don't think so. I think that Aljo's unique funk style is what gave Henry Cejudo such a difficult time. I think the size of Aljamain Sterling, he's probably more of a 145er than he is a 135. Merab Dvalishvili is more of a 135 pounder. So let's take away his size. Let's take away his wrestling because I don't think it's at the level of Aljamain Sterling, his takedown game anyway, right? Let's talk about that because he does some judo style takedowns, not just all wrestling. However, I think that Henry Cejudo will be able to nullify this. Where it starts to get interesting is with the output. Can Henry Cejudo match the output of a Merab Dvalishvili? I don't know, but I think he can, and I think he knows exactly what he's getting into. I think Merab is one of those guys that it doesn't mean you could stop it, but you know exactly what to expect. And I think coming off a loss against his teammate Aljamain Sterling, I think Henry Cejudo is going to be extremely well prepared for this. If it was a 5-rounder, I would be agreeing with you, Brian. I would say, hey, you know what? I'm leaning towards Merab here. But for this 3-rounder, I'm going to be leaning towards Cejudo. I think it's going to be extremely close, but I see a lot of value here. It's not a whole lot of guys with this kind of matchup where you see Cejudo as an underdog here. So I think there's some nice value here for Cejudo. I'm going to go with Henry here. I think it's going to be close. I do admit I'm taking a little bit of a risk here, but I like Cejudo in this spot. I think people are sleeping on Henry a little bit.
Well, and I think your preparation or your prediction is largely rooted in the expectation that Henry has prepared optimally.
Right.
One of the questions that I'm going to ask him in the fighter meeting is how would you compare your preparation for this fight compared to the Aljamain Sterling camp and maybe to his last fight before he retired after beating Dominic Cruz? I do believe that if Henry is all in, there is some value potentially on him, plus 164. And for the record, I did not intend to cause further confusion. Merab, both acceptable. All right.
Yeah, okay, thanks.
Featured bout of welterweight. Ian Machado, Gary, minus 230. Jeff Neal, plus 190. This fight was initially slated for UFC 292 in Boston last August. Neal was forced to pull out. Then, of course, Ian Gary got really sick in advance of his scheduled fight with former teammate Vicente Luque last year. So the UFC struck and remade this matchup. Bri, what do you think about this one? Ian Gary trying to stay undefeated against Jeff Hands of Steel Neal.
Just stacking bangers after bangers on this card. I love this fight. I'm glad they remade this fight. The Luque Gary fight was great. Glad they remade this. There's a little heat with the mugshot t-shirts and everything, and just matchup wise, it's gonna be fireworks, right? I've poked fun of Ian Gary. I'm not outwardly making fun of the guy like everyone did. Everyone piled on to him, whatever. I think he's a fantastic fighter. I don't care about his personal life when it comes to this fight. I care about what I see in the cage, and he's fantastic. At range, he's dangerous. His cardio is great. Defense is shoring up a little bit more, which is great because, Song Kinong put him down bad. I mean, Song Kinong put him out. He woke up on the mat. You got to be tight when you're fighting Jeff Neal. He was down there in Brazil with Charles Oliveira. He's getting good training in, and he's obviously motivated. All that shit talking, all the Sean Strickland stuff, all the wife stuff. He's got a fucking chip on his shoulder. He's coming in here mad, not to mention a little prior beef with Jeff Neal. Jeff Neal, phenomenal fighter. He took Shavkat Rakhmonov to the bell, basically. Got caught in that standing rear naked, but that's a guy who's going to be future champion in Rakhmonov, right? And Jeff Neal gave him the best of the best. Jeff Neal, inconsistent, though. We can't have the Jeff Neal who showed up and fought Neil Magny. We just can't. We got to have the best version of Jeff Neal. And the best version of Jeff Neal, slick southpaw, in your face, knows his range really well, doesn't have great length with his limbs, but great distant management. He's great in the pocket. I see Ian Gary wanting to stand on the outside. I see Jeff Neal trying to find his range. They're going to be playing with each other in the first round, and then explosion's going to happen. Who do I trust more? I'm trusting Ian Gary more. I think the skills are for real. I like this kid a lot. I think Ian Gary can mix things up. Jeff Neal's takedown offense is phenomenal. If he wants to mix it up, he can. He's got the length, but I like Ian Gary at space. I think the head kicks, body kicks are going to be money. He can't just go straight hands with Jeff Neal. You know what I mean? He'll get slapped. But if he goes full striking, his whole arsenal, the 8 limbs, I like Ian Gary to win this fight here. Sign me up for Ian Gary.
All right, nicely done, Brian. Not unlike what Dan Tom said, Kenny, about the drama and the noise and all of this surrounding Ian Gary. I don't really even think about that stuff, if I'm being totally honest with you. And I think enough time has sort of elapsed here that maybe it won't be this huge thing for him to deal with during fight week. I could be wrong on that. I find it a little bit disappointing that a fighter of his profile has to disable comments now on all of his Instagram posts. Yeah. But what do you make of him in this spot here, KenFlo, against the underdog Jeff Neal?
Well, I'd appreciate if Brian left a little food on the table. That was a pretty damn good breakdown, for Pete's sake. Wow. That was awesome, man. Hey, listen, I think that's all spot on. I think the range and the variety of skills from Ian Gary is going to pose a lot of problems from Jeff Neal, who sometimes gets caught in these patterns and sometimes will kind of continually throw the same stuff, hoping for a different result. And again, someone like Ian Gary, who knows how to adapt and kind of become this chameleon at times, I think it's going to be tough, especially if he gets his kicking game going against Jeff Neal. And another spot-on comment from Brian Petrie is, this can't be a boxing match. If this is a boxing match, Jeff Neal goes out there and knocks out Ian Gary. If there's one guy who's going to go out there and land that one shot and win, it's going to be Jeff Neal. He's got one-punch knockout power. Okay. Ian Gary is more maybe on the level of a Sean Strickland, where he can overwhelm you with his pacing, with his speed, with his volume. It's the accumulation of blows that will kill you. And I think that's where Ian Machado Gary is going to really shine in this fight. He does have to have a very disciplined approach, though. He can't get out of his element. He's got to be smart. And the same goes for Jeff Neal, right? Because Jeff Neal's probably coming into this fight very emotional. I think in some ways it helps him that this fight gets pushed back, where now he can kind of reevaluate where he was at emotionally, all that stuff. So I don't know if that same kind of passion is there from both guys necessarily. That remains to be seen. But yeah, I'm leaning towards Gary, man. He just seems to be the more technical fighter, younger fighter, faster fighter, longer fighter. Those advantages are tough to overcome when you put it all together.
Yeah. Can't deny the length. Can't deny the length. You know, Cody wrote in the chat earlier when we were talking about Petrie's height, like, because Cody's tall too. And Cody's like 6'2". He'll probably tell me he's taller than that. But, you know, Cody says they say the same thing to me. And I'm like, what the fuck? Do I give off short guy energy? You know, like, I hope I don't give off short guy energy. But I'm finding out increasingly. I took my son to an endocrinologist because he's tiny and he seems like he might be a good candidate for that human growth hormone. And the doctor's basically telling me I'm like 30% in terms of my height at 5'8" 3/4. I thought I was closer to like the average male than I am, you know. We just try to make up for it in other ways. Let's get to the co-main event. Robert Whittaker minus 225, Paulo Costa plus 190. So, Kenny, I'll lead with you here. Whittaker is suggestive of violence. He'll try to rally back from the loss to DDP last summer at UFC 290. Costa hasn't fought since a great performance and win over Luke Rockhold. That was UFC 291. Also last July, he was then booked to face Khamzat Chimaev in October at UFC 294. Nasty elbow infection forced him out of that matchup. Very interesting co-main event, KenFlo, and a pretty big price next to Paulo Costa if you do like that side. What are your thoughts on the co-main event?
This is a fascinating one. And I feel like the more I think about it, the more confused I get in a lot of ways. I do think it's a benefit that Robert Whittaker faltered in his last fight, that he underestimated this guy from South Africa, Dricus du Plessis. And I also think he sees quite the opportunity here to get back into that title picture with a win here against Paulo Costa. Paulo, though, when he gets into a groove, not only is he powerful, he can throw a lot of volume. And if you allow him into boxing range, that's where Paulo Costa can win this fight. He is crazy fast for this division. You see a guy who's built like that, you're like, well, okay, well, he's jacked. The guy looks like an Adonis, but is he fast? Unfortunately, yes. Yeah, he is also very fast. Well, is he tough? Is he one of those guys that just looks tough? He looks the part, but then when he gets in trouble, he kind of gives up. No, he's actually very game as well. So I think Costa is going to try to get in the face of Whittaker early. I think he's going to try to keep a pace on Whittaker that is going to confuse and frustrate him. Whittaker, though, is extremely fast for that division. I think he's got some great skills where Whittaker kind of maybe is not at his strongest, because he is strong. He's just not at his strongest when it comes to the volume department. He's not necessarily the guy, and maybe this is without really looking at stats, so perhaps I'm wrong on this, but I think that if he doesn't throw a whole lot of volume here, that's where he can get in trouble and maybe drop around here and there. He's got to keep this one on the feet at distance, be the slick karate fighter that he is, and then look for some takedowns to score and win rounds. If he sees an opportunity to finish Costa, then he can go for it. But if he's just kind of looking for that knockout on the feet, he's got to be extremely careful, because Costa is very dangerous. He hits very hard. He's very fast. And I think in some ways, the fact that we haven't seen Costa in a long time, it can be confusing because a lot of guys can get very good when you don't see him. And I think Costa is one of those guys that has been working in the offseason. He's had some injuries and things like that, but I think he's really been looking for ways to improve. And I think this fight is a lot closer than people realize. Who am I leaning towards? I'm leaning towards Whittaker. But we'll talk about what I'll do betting-wise later. But very, very interesting fight.
Brian, co-main event, Robert Whittaker minus 225, Paulo Costa plus 190. Your thoughts?
Yeah, Robert Whittaker can't show up for this fight. It's got to be Bobby Knuckles. Bobby Knuckles has to step in there and get fucking mean, because the DDP fight leaves this bad taste in my mouth. It didn't seem like he was ready to go to war. He could have underestimated DDP. I've been wrong about DDP his entire career, so what the fuck do I know? But I felt like that's not the guy that fought Yoel Romero. That's not the same guy who's ready to go, ready to die in there against Yoel Romero. The success, the money, whatever, doesn't matter. He's still a warrior, former champion. And you look at his fights after Yoel Romero, they've been pretty clean besides the Izzy fight. He's not getting hit much. He's using his wrestling more. Paulo Costa is going to bring you to a war. He's showing up at your door. He's not taking a backward step, and he's throwing heat, and he's throwing hot, big punches, powerful body shots to your head, to everything. Whitaker has great movement, great kicks. His wrestling's on point. He surprises you with that takedown. Paulo Costa, Rocco got him down. He stayed on his back the entire that third round. I don't like that, but all I want from Costa is him to fight more. He's Brazilian Superman. Look at the fucking guy, right? Yeah. He looks very lean to me. I don't think weight's going to be a problem. And plus 185, again, I feel like I'm just seeing it today. 185 is a gift. I like Costa here. I think he's going to knock out Bobby Knuckles within 2 rounds. I like the conviction. Costa. Yeah, I like Paulo Costa big here.
I could see that.
And for the undisputed UFC featherweight championship, Alexander Volkanovski minus 120. Ilia Topuria is plus 100. When I sent you guys the odds, it was minus 110 on both sides. Little action towards the Volk man. 75% of respondents to our Anik Florian podcast poll on X at Anik Florian Pod. 75% like Volkanovski. Certainly a lot of the fan base out there is loving the value on him. Trying to make good on a 6th successive title defense, taking on the undefeated phenom Ilia Topuria. And with respect, guys, forget about UFC 299 in my backyard or UFC 300. This is one of the most consequential fights I will have ever called in terms of what it could mean for the future of the featherweight division and the respective legacies of both of these men. I'm fascinated, Bri, by this main event. I need to know on which side you fall.
I love that you said that. This is getting overlooked a little bit. This is a fantastic main event. Topuria, I've been a little slow on him. And it wasn't until I watched him butcher Bryce Mitchell live, I'm like, oh, okay, this guy's for real. And then what he did to Josh Emmett, I'm like, oh, this guy's for real. And the fact that this is not going to be the only win, lose, or draw, he will be fighting for a title again. I'll say that. Fantastic boxing. Vision in the pocket is great. He can lead the dance. He can counter. His ground game's phenomenal as well. Cardio proved it against Josh Emmett. All the boxes have been checked. This is the fight we need. Volkanovski, I was surprised when he set the lines earlier this week. They opened as a pick'em. I think that's a little disrespectful. I know Volkanovski's coming off the head kick knockout over Islam. And I tell you what, once I watched the countdown show and seeing how Volkanovski handled that loss, I see some people chirping him, oh, you're making excuses. No, he's holding himself accountable. Coming off surgery, I was drinking. I don't know why. He has humility. He has self-awareness. He has self-reflection, which I think a lot of fighters could use. And I think that is the one main point that is going to bring him to this fight and bring him a W in this fight. I like the way he switches stances. I like his wrestling. He wrestled against Yair beautifully, beat up Yair. And the strength of schedule, I mean, if you look at who he fought versus Ilia, it is different worlds, right? Volkanovski's a guy who I think is one of the few guys who I like when they switch stances. There's only a handful of them. There's a lot of guys that are trying to do it, and I think it's awkward. I think it's herky-jerky. He does it right. It's phenomenal. His kicks, both sides of his southpaw or orthodox, he's dangerous. His wrestling's phenomenal. I don't know if he's going to get Topuria down early, but I think he'll be able to get him down late. And the thing about Topuria, he teed off on Josh Emmett. That's because Josh Emmett stood in front of him. Alexander Volkanovski's not going to stand in front of this guy. Alexander Volkanovski has great footwork, great patterns, great movement. Obviously, the big question mark is he coming back too soon from getting knocked out, right? He's 35, 36 years old. Is he coming back too soon getting knocked out? I like his motivation. I like how hungry he is. He's in fucking phenomenal shape. Look at the guy's Instagram. The guy is ripped. I like Volkanovski here. Again, I'm convicted. I like him in this spot. I wouldn't be surprised if he gets a late 4th, 5th round TKO. But right now, minus 120, that's a gorgeous number for one of the best pound-for-pound fighters in the world.
Volkanovski will be 36 in September, but certainly it looks like the preparation was absolutely there. He's just not the excuse-making type, right? I talk about just truthfulness, right? As a parent, it's like I'm either talking about hard work or honesty, right? I have 2 daughters. One of them fucking lies and one doesn't, right? One of them literally won't tell a lie. The other one pauses every time I ask her a fucking hard question. I think Volkanovski was just trying to lay out the truth. It's not like he did it right after the fight.
Right.
But Kenny, Ilia Topuria, man, he just has this special championship quality and championship medal about him now. I don't know if it's going to produce a world title this weekend, but I certainly see this guy as a future champion, even if he doesn't get it done against the otherworldly Alexander Volkanovski. KenFlo, as you know, we don't make you make picks on all these fights, but we will need a prediction on the main event. Who do you have?
Okay, fine. I've been looking forward to this fight for a very, very long time, guys. This is such a great title fight. I can't wait for it. It is absolutely fascinating to me. There's so much to take into account, as Brian was talking about. There's so many skills on both sides of the coin here that it is a little bit difficult to decide. Now, when you look at Volkanovski, I think what makes him great is his intelligence. It's his ability to analyze a fighter. And of course, we need to include his team in that process. And it's his ability to execute when he needs to. I think what set him back was the fact that he didn't really have the ability to really do that on a training level in that fight against Makhachev. We do, of course, need to talk about that knockout. What did that do to him? For me, I don't see it as so much of a concern from a physical standpoint, because this isn't a guy who's been knocked out once, twice, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 times already. That's been the only time that we've seen him knocked out. And I don't think it's gonna be a major problem here. I think, and from a confidence standpoint, do I expect Volkanovski to be short on confidence heading into this fight? Absolutely not. The guy is good everywhere. It seems like he always has a perfect game plan. And then he always knows how to not only beat you, but also finish you and have you regret, you saying what you said and even challenging him in the first place. From everyone who's worked with Volkanovski, they say he's probably very underrated as a grappler and one of the strongest dudes that they've ever trained with. So Volkanovski has all that going for him. Topuria has all of that as well. What he doesn't have is the same level of experience. This is going to be his first fight as a 5-rounder, right, in the UFC. Just like what we saw with Pfeiffer and all that stuff, that can be a concern. When you go into those championship rounds for the first time, it is a whole new ball of wax. So, but we have seen Topuria in trouble in fights. We have seen him fight at 155. We've seen him all over the place and experience a lot of different things. The variety of opponents that he's faced, grapplers, wrestlers, strikers, he's kind of seen it all, and he's answered those questions extremely well with flying colors. So this is an undefeated fighter that, for me, is the truest threat to the throne when it comes to Volkanovski. So every time we see Topuria, he always seems to bring in this new set of skills. Like, oh, I didn't know he could do that. I didn't know he could do this. Yeah. I didn't know he could do that. The guy's a problem. He really is. He's a problem everywhere. So if he does encounter adversity, which he certainly will against someone like Volkanovski, I see him responding to that adversity very, very well. But for Volkanovski, man, again, this is a guy that many thought was the best pound-for-pound fighter on the planet. He's certainly up there in the top 2 or 3. And if I see this kind of value from a betting perspective, I got to be leaning towards Volkanovski here. I think he's going to be. I think he's going to have a lot of gas in the tank. I think he's going to be extremely motivated, and not only to shut up Ilia Topuria, but to remind everybody of why people were calling him the best fighter on the planet, pound for pound. So leaning towards Volkanovski here. I think it's going to be a fantastic fight. If Topuria is able to win this one, then my goodness, I see him holding on to this belt for a long time. The other thing I want to mention, and Dan Tom mentioned this earlier, was the other concern for me is the fact that he does lean to a certain side a lot, either to bait you into kind of countering you, or he'll lean a little bit too far forward when he's looking for that body shot, when he's looking for that liver shot, which he loves to throw. His left hook downstairs and upstairs is a problem. So Volkanovski has to be aware of that. But the way to solve that is you basically you take your kick and you just run it right through him. And I think Volkanovski is going to see that. He's going to look for that kick often to try to knock out Topuria. And then the other thing, yes, Topuria is going to be a little bit taller, something that he doesn't experience very often in that division. But Volkanovski has that long-ass reach, man, and you can't forget about that either. So I like Volkanovski in this spot slightly, but, man, is this going to be an amazing fight.
And I do like that you acknowledge the Topuria improvements. I've said repeatedly in the build-up to this fight, he's working in silence. Nobody sees what he's doing. That's probably by design. Yes. And it is his second 5-round fight in the UFC. He went 5 with Josh Emmett and did get stronger as that fight went along. All right, time now for Place Your Bets. I got media coming up in about 4 minutes, so we'll see how expeditiously we can do that. Place Your Bets brought to you by JohnAnik.com. You guys have $1,000 to spend at UFC 298. Quickly, we update the standings. I know Brian Petrie is going to keep me honest. He was at plus 659.85. $300 hit on Prates at minus 218. That paid 137.61. You lost $500 on Joe Pyfer, $200 on Brad Tavares, brings your year-to-date total to $97.46 to the positive. KenFlo was at plus 589.32. But he's now at minus 410.68. Lost $700 on Joe Pyfer and $300 on Armin Petrosian. With that said, time for your UFC 298 selections. Brian Petrie, you have $1,000 to spend. Where you going with your action, kid? Talk to me.
So I see the comments, everyone hammering on me. Brian, do a parlay. I am a straight wager guy. I do give out a parlay, but I'm going to give you a little parlay. Merab, Amanda Lemos, plus 166 at $300. You can get that on Draftkings Sportsbook. I like Paulo Costa, plus 185 for $200. I like Alexander Volkanovski, minus 120 for $300. And then I just got this line from DraftKings as well. Fluffy Kopolov, over 1.5, minus 160 for $200.
Fluffy and Kopolov over 1.5 at minus 160 for 200. And just so you know, we're giving you plus 190 on Paulo Costa because as of this taping, a little better than plus 185. Nice. All right, nice job spreading out your $1,000. KenFlo, where's your action at UFC 298, my man?
Get your pen ready, kid.
All right.
We got plus 250 for Lemos. So $250 on Lemos. We got $250 on Cejudo. We got $250 on Gary. We got $150 on Volk. Now we do have a parlay here. This is a 4-fight parlay because I'm an idiot. $100. We got Lemos, Hernandez, Gary, and Volk. Let's go.
I like that. Woo! I like the way you spread out your action there. All right. Don't forget, Brian Petrie also has his own podcast, the MMA Takes podcast, which you can check out in advance of UFC 298. And he's a great follow on X as well at Brian Petrie MMA. Outstanding job breaking down a lot of fights this week, Brian. We appreciate it very much and look forward to talking with you about it next week, man.
Absolutely, boys. John, have fun at Anaheim. You guys are the best. Let's see you.
Thank you, buddy. And KenFlo, great job bringing all of that to our UFC 298 preview. Thank you to Dan Tom, to Brian Petrie, our executive producer, Cody Bone Marrow. Don't forget, extra rounds on location and remember the show this weekend.
Remember the name! Bilal Muhammad!
Extra rounds of UFC 298 with Bilal Muhammad and Jason Anik. I will be there with them on Friday. I hope to meet a lot of UFC fans there. Don't forget, JohnAnik.com, 20% off all Anik and Florian podcast merchandise, including the shirt KenFlo is wearing, and also our new flagship One More Sleep designs are available as well. We can't wait to recap the shit out of UFC 298 with all of you fine folks coming up next Monday. We actually might go live Sunday night, actually. You know what? I'm flying to Boston to do some stuff with DraftKings. We're going to go live Sunday night to recap UFC 298 with you guys. So we will talk to you Sunday night. Until then, for Cody and KenFlo, I'm Jon Anik. Thank you all for watching, for listening, subscribing. Tell your friends, tell your mom. We'll talk to you after 298. Enjoy the fights. Yo fucking thing.
The soul to the bread, he's cornbread. Cornbread! He's cornbread. Cornbread! Life is so precious, do the best that you can. Keep your hands on the bar, here's the open man. He's cornbread.